As we seek to be formed by the ways of Jesus, we want to take a few weeks to talk about a spiritual discipline that's oftentimes overlooked: fasting. This idea of fasting is found all throughout Scripture, and Jesus himself talks about it in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 6, verses 16 through 18. And Jesus, when he's talking to his followers about fasting, starts off in verse 16 by saying, "And when you fast." Notice he doesn't say if you fast, he says when you fast. This is a spiritual discipline and practice that Jesus expected his followers to participate in. Last week, we were encouraged toward a food fast, and abstaining from food for a specific period of time for a spiritual purpose is what Scripture is referring to when it talks about fasting all throughout the Bible. But this week, we're going to talk about a different kind of fast that is sometimes referred to as a soul fast. Fasting is really less about what you're giving up and more about creating space to receive from God the things that He wants to give us in place of what we give up, namely Himself. So it's about taking a break from the temporary pleasures and satisfactions of the world so that we can more deeply realign with the truth and the reality that our truest and deepest needs and desires can only be met by God Himself. Scripture says that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God. So the invitation is that as we momentarily starve our flesh, our spirits are freed to feast on God. God longs to speak to you. He longs to meet with you, to be in a relationship with you, and to give you Himself. But oftentimes we're too busy or preoccupied to receive from God the things that He is wanting and willing to give to us. In John chapter 10, Jesus says, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me." But if we're being honest, that idea of hearing God's voice sounds pretty foreign to a lot of us. How many of us, every time we get even 5 minutes for potential stillness or silence, immediately turn our attention to the nearest screen? We have filled our minds to the brim with an endless stream of noise and information, and quite frankly, we have grown numb to God. Comparison to other people's highlight reels shapes our desires more than Jesus' promise for abundant life. News headlines inform our opinion of what's true more than Scripture. And our idea of rest is binging on Netflix rather than being restored and renewed by the peace and the presence of God. So while fasting is and always has been a practice central to spiritual formation for believers, if we're going without food but we still don't have space for God, we're really missing the point. So our invitation and challenge for this week is to do a soul fast. And this is going to look different for all of us, but a good place to start that probably applies to most of us is social media. Try going without it for a day or a week, or maybe even longer. It might be a good idea to go ahead and delete the app off your phone for a while, because we all know how strong the reflex is to open it up every time we have a spare minute. That if you're not on social media or you want to go beyond that, try a phone or a technology fast. Maybe it's 1 hour a day or 1 day a week. Turn your phone off or put it on Do Not Disturb. Maybe charge it away from you at night so that it's not the first thing that you look at when you wake up and the last thing that you look at before you go to bed. Leave your phone at home and go for a prayer walk. Spend some time in Scripture seeking the Lord. Or like it says in Psalm 46:10, just take a moment to truly be still and know that He is God. Remember, fasting is less about what we're giving up and more about what and who we're creating space for. So what does it look like for you to create space in your mind and your heart to hear and receive from God this week?